Morena Tato, this is Jackie Hay from Creative New Zealand again. For those of you who don't know, I am the Senior Advisor Audience Development at Creative New Zealand, currently filling in on maternity leave for Helen Bartle. Welcome to our 5th webinar on using Twitter to engage audiences, and I'd like to say a really special welcome to those of you who might be joining us for the first time today. So most of you who have been dialing in regularly will know what the process is. We'll have an initial presentation from Vicky Allpress-Hill, and she'll be talking about how we might think about Twitter as an audience engagement tool. At that point, we'll have questions for 5 minutes, and then Vicky will complete the last part of the presentation, and we'll have time for another 5 minutes of questions at the end, and then wrap up. If you'd like to ask questions during the presentation as you think of them, please feel free. You can type them into the Q&A section on your screen. If you if you have any technical problems, then you can use chat, but what would be really great is if you focus on any questions to Q&A so that actually everybody can then see what your questions are, and Vicky and or I are able to answer them. So just a reminder that our next webinar on the 29th of August is about running effective paid online advertising campaigns, and I, for one, am very much looking forward to that. We are going to have a guest presenter, and we're really excited about that, Ray Bassett, who is the digital marketing manager at an entertainment-based marketing agency in Sydney, is going to be presenting, and she has a real wealth of experience in online advertising, so it will be great to be able to access her expertise. That will be our last webinar in the series on the 29th of August, and as you know, each week we send out a survey to ask for some feedback, and at the end of the last one, what we'll do is have a different survey where what we'd like to ask you is what topics you might like if we're to have another series of webinars. We'd really love your feedback on what would be really useful for you, so if you could start to have a think about that, that would be fabulous. In the meantime, I will hand over to Vicky. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Jackie. And hi everyone, and thanks everyone for attending again. It's great to be delivering another webinar. Twitter can be a perplexing tool, and most arts organisations are now using it, but as a social media network it does raise a lot of questions. How do I actually get value out of it? What should I be tweeting? How do I keep on top of it all? So today's webinar aims to get you thinking more broadly about Twitter and what it can achieve for you, using some examples from the field that range from the simple to the audacious, and hopefully there's something in there for each of you, whether you're an avid tweeter or just starting out. I'll just move to the next slide. So here's what we're going to cover today in the next hour. It's going to be another, wild ride full of information, but just a reminder that you can refer to the PowerPoint afterwards, so don't get too panicked if you miss some more detailed information. Some of the stuff you'll need to go back to and read at your leisure. So in the first section, we're going to look at Twitter as an audience engagement tool, Twitter as part of your wider strategy, and the different levels of engagement you can aim for on Twitter. And then we're going to talk after the first short break about the TweetSeats debate. So what are TweetSeats, and why are they so controversial? Ways that you can maximise the opportunity, some of the best practice that's out there, particularly related to the arts, and tips for managing your Twitter activity. And then we'll have another little batch of questions and wrap up. And I do want to stress that not only do I want your questions, but I would love any stories that you have about successes you have had on Twitter or great case studies you've seen. Twitter can be a highly effective tool for building relationships with audiences and stakeholders. The trick is understanding how, and also the role that Twitter plays in your digital strategy, and how Twitter is different to the other digital channels in your mix. Twitter has a number of qualities that are great for building a connection between arts organisations and their audiences. So these are some of them. So starting with reach, a single tweet can gain you huge reach. And during Rugby World Cup 2011, Jackie Hay and I were working together on the Real New Zealand Festival, and we were amazed at how far our tweets would go sometimes. So if a few influential people or organisations retweeted them, I'm talking that we could get tens, sometimes hundreds of thousands of people potentially viewing a tweet. So it's great for broadening your reach. Demographically, just jumping to the top right there, Twitter users constitute a really good match demographically and behaviourally with the arts. So they tend to be older, this is what I've seen, that they're older on average than Facebook followers and YouTube users. However, this does depend on your arts organisation, your audience, and in the US last year, the 18 to 24 age group has had the highest growth on Twitter. But there's a mix of male and female, a fairly equal mix with a slight female skew. And I've observed there's a lot of creative professionals on Twitter. Twitter users tend to be curious, engaged, and social, and sometimes opinionated, and they tend to be more in the urban areas. So they're a great match for the arts. You can respond instantly to customers and vice versa, so responsiveness is a great trait of Twitter, and also to things being said about you, and you can respond quite directly if you choose. So there's that immediacy. If someone's really enthusiastic about something that you're doing, they can rave about it straight away. They can also rant about it if they're not so enthusiastic. And networking is a great trait of Twitter. I read somewhere recently that there's no hierarchy on Twitter, so you can quite easily find yourself talking to a well-known author or CEO, for example. And Twitter is full of influencers. This is because it's full of people being followed and listened to. So it's a real peer-to-peer recommendation tool, and it can have more influence in traditional media amongst certain target groups. So if someone who's being followed says something on Twitter, they're admired, they're respected, people are going to notice and listen to them. And, so that leads into word of mouth for you. It's a great community tool for building loyal followers, long-term commitment and community. And it's great for awareness. So if you can get into people's Twitter streams, and particularly in their lists, you can keep top of mind with them. So, probably most of you know all this, but it's great evidence if you're ever sort of arguing for investment into Twitter. So you can utilise these features to engage with arts audiences on a number of levels. So you can gain insight, starting from the bottom left of this curve, you can gain insights into how they think. So you can observe them, see what they're saying about you and others, hear their views. It gives them a means to share, so to take information about you and share it with others. And it's a way for you to deliver information quickly to them. And a lot of organisations are now providing customer service on Twitter, so people may complain or have a question and you can respond straight away. And it's a great way to encourage quite easily created user-generated content, so content that the users themselves create for fun, whether it's an image, whether it's a little poem, as you'll see later. And it's a way potentially of inviting them into the creative process. So just a few examples. Look how enthusiastic these two Sydney theatre goers were about these performances that they attended and how quickly they were able to share this with their followers. It's a great way to get across really important information that has to be communicated quickly. So in this case, Sydney Opera House had an issue of a cancellation and they had to let people know. And Belvoir Street Theatre in Sydney are really great at delivering quite a lot of information via their Twitter feed. So you can see if you look through here that there's a lot of stuff that they'll be able to tell people via Twitter. So whether it's recruitment or whether it's news about announcements and things like that. So it's a great tool for that. And also here's a couple of examples of arts organisations using it for customer service. So particularly if you pick up on the fact that someone is complaining about something about you, you can jump straight in and deal with their query, and it shows others that you're dealing with it as well. This is a great one. This is Woolly Mammoth Theatre Company in Washington, D.C., and they had, when they were doing The Agony and Ecstasy of Steve Jobs, they had the staff members pose as Mike Daisy, and then they invited their Twitter followers to pose as well and post their own photos. So that's a lot of fun. It's audience involvement and creativity, but it's also creating curiosity about the play by others. Steppenwolf Theatre in Chicago are performing Chekhov's Three Sisters at the moment, and they've been running a competition to write an incoherent sentence using Chekhov as a verb to win a pair of tickets. So again, it's kind of just a lot of fun and it gets people engaged and thinking creatively. I've noticed that theatre and literary organisations are some of the most creative on Twitter, which is understandable, I guess. And tweet walls at conferences and events are a great way to enable audiences to connect, not just with you, but with each other in real time. and feel that they're contributing to the event. And there's a lot of free software you can use to create these tweet walls. And it also shows transparency on your part, and we'll talk about transparency a little bit later. So where does Twitter fit in your wider strategy? Well, just remember that Twitter is part of one of many channels, and it must work strategically alongside all the others to deliver on your organisational goals. So a typical lineup of digital channels that an audience might have is this, that an organisation might have is this. And every channel has its strengths and distinct audiences, but they work even more effectively together in synergy. You've heard me say this many times before. So don't just think about Twitter in isolation. Think about ways to cross-fertilise, use content cleverly across all your channels, and perhaps use one of your channels to provide content for another. So I'd suggest doing some reading, Google searching around how you can use Twitter in concert with all your other digital channels. So how does Twitter integrate with Instagram, for example? How does it integrate with Pinterest? How can you pull your Twitter feed into your Facebook channel? There's lots of ideas. Here's a couple of ideas. So just on a really simple level, utilise the content that you're putting up on Facebook and link Twitter across to it. It's all people on Twitter across to it. Sometimes you've got to be careful. Sometimes Twitter people don't like to go across to Facebook, but if you make it really clear that that's where you're sending them, it's a great way to sort of use photo albums and images and things like that. This is a great example, again, Belvoir Street Theatre in Sydney, of using the customisable tabs on Facebook now, the way the timeline works now. You can customise these, and as you'll see, they're linking to all their other channels, including Twitter. And don't forget to remind people about your email newsletter and other sort of digital things you've got going on. I really like the description of this online magazine, actually, an exciting tangle of features, videos, podcasts, and interviews. I thought that was nice. There are three key ways, really, to integrate Twitter into your website. So the first is obviously you want your call to action sign-up links, and you want them to be prominent and where people can see them really clearly, and as in the case of Chamber Music New Zealand here. So you're encouraging people who are on your website to sign up for Twitter, obviously. And the other is to have the plugins, so have a Tweet This plugin. This is on the New Zealand Herald website. You can have it on any content on your page, and people can just tweet immediately from the page. So that's a really great way to harness word of mouth. And of course, you can bring a live feed if you choose into your website, and that can also be based just on one hashtag. So if you have a lot of Twitter activity going on around a particular event, you can have that pulled into the event page. There's all sorts of things you can do. You can just read about Twitter plugins. They've got some really great resources to Twitter themselves, and have a look at all the different ways that you can do this. I wanted to mention the importance of being consistent across your channels, and Silo have done a really great job. Their visual imagery is just stunning at the moment, and this is their Twitter feed. I think Tim's on the call. He's probably listening to this thinking, whoa. Anyway, I think it's beautifully done, and it aligns so nicely with all their other channels, Facebook, the website, and email. So there's a real consistency across them all. So don't forget about that. Don't forget about really utilising the graphical side of Twitter to align with everything else. I thought this was a great little infographic which you can look at more at your leisure later, but it was it's showing how to use the follow, create and engage functions of Twitter to deliver on a range of organisational strategies. I found this really interesting to read and a great way to sort of think about planning your strategy. So have a look at that later on. I'm certainly going to be utilising it. I've just discovered it yesterday. So the next point I want to make is that you can choose a level of engagement on Twitter that suits your organisation and audience readiness, really. So you don't have to feel frightened that you have to offer TweetSeats and things like that. You can do things at a fairly basic level as well. So just some examples of what I'm talking about here. At a very basic level, you can offer rewards to your followers. So by following you, not only do they get your information and not only do you converse with them, but every now and again you're going to give an opportunity to win. And it's quite a great place to run competitions, Twitter, because you don't have the restrictions that you do on Facebook. We're not allowed to run promotions on Facebook that are utilising the functionality of Facebook. So you can, for little giveaways like this, you can run them on Twitter and you can send people across from Facebook. So on a really basic level, you're simply rewarding followers and giving them a reason to keep following you. You can go a little bit step further and do like the Sydney Opera House did in their recent Flight of the Conchords Twitter giveaway, where you ask them to do a little bit of something that's going to benefit you. So what people had to do here was follow Sydney Opera House and complete the tweet, "I deserve to win because ... but they also had to include the hashtag for this competition and the at Sydney Opera House Twitter handle in order to enter. So what that was doing was obviously spreading the hashtag and Twitter handle around to all their followers. And then they went into a draw to win a double pass. So a simple little tactic. Sydney Opera House have done these. They went through a phase where they were doing giveaways every Friday, and every time they do a ticket giveaway, they require that the person tweet the hashtag and the Twitter handle. So it's just a simple requirement, and people are happy to do that. So this is also encouraging your Twitter followers to get a little bit more engaged and creative. So here's an example, the National Gallery in London. They are running at the moment a TweetSeats competition. It's a poetry competition where people have to write a 140-character poem that's inspired by one of three Titian works in their exhibition, which is on at the moment. And there's a judging panel who includes a leading poet. So this is really, really fun. And so if you want to follow this, just go to #TitianPoem. You'll see the hashtag on this slide here and just see how that pans out. I think it's a really lovely idea. You can also invite people to a tweet-up, which is an in-person meetup. Not to be confused with TweetSeats. As you'll see here, sometimes the definitions cross over. But the idea of a tweet-up is that people who know each other on Twitter or who you've met on Twitter get invited to meet in person. So this was their first inaugural tweet-up. This Woolly Mammoth Theatre is in Washington, D.C. I think I mentioned them before. And they ran this in January, and it was around the world premiere of the play Civilization All You Can Eat by Jason Grote. I think that's the right pronunciation. And would-be participants had to explain their interest using a hashtag, and then Woolly Mammoth selected 3 winners. And then the winners got to attend the first rehearsal of Civilization as well as a technical and final dress rehearsal, and were encouraged to tweet. And at the final dress rehearsal, they were encouraged to live tweet. The interesting thing actually about this story, if you Google it, is that Jason Grote, the playwright, actually wasn't told about this before it went live online, and he was not actually that happy about it. Not about the live tweeting, but just that he felt that it could have been better executed and integrated right from the beginning of the rehearsal process. But yeah, that's an interesting story to see. You can then go up a step and actually deliver a work of art online, like the Royal Shakespeare Company did with Such Tweet Sorrow, where the production unfolded on Twitter to followers around the globe over a period of 5 weeks. You can Google this as well and read about it. Really interesting project. And there's instances as well where you can deliver things like live program notes via Twitter. So the National Symphony Orchestra in America has experimented with that. So as people are sitting there in particular seats, they're allowed to read the program notes coming through that are talking about the work and where they're at in the work at the time. So we'll come back to TweetSeats in a moment. And if you really want to get to the highest level of engagement, you can have the audience create the work of art with you, as the Royal Opera House did with the Twitter Opera a couple of years ago, the world's first Twitter-written opera. There was a lot around about that at the time. Or the highest level of audience participation and risk is having the audience actually direct the performance or where the performance goes via Twitter, whether it's via a tweet wall or whether they're tweeting instructions to the actors. I've heard a bit about that. I created this matrix for the Arts Marketing Association in the UK's TweetMeet. There's a link about the TweetMeet in the resources. It was all over the UK. They had people meet up, members of the Arts Marketing Association, and talk about Twitter. So there's some great resources that they've got from that. But it's really it's a model that shows where different levels of Twitter activity sit, dependent on audience willingness to participate and organisational commitment and capability. So right down at the lower end of audience involvement and organisational commitment, you have those, like I showed you earlier, the rewards for Twitter followers and just general conversation. Right at the top right of the matrix, you've got that live audience participation in the performance or crowdsourced creation of the work. And then the others kind of sit at varying points on the matrix. This is something to have a look at later as well. But my point is that you can choose your level of engagement. So if you've got an audience that's very, very highly active on Twitter and very eager to be involved and participate, you can be really creative and out there with what you do, and you can expect them to jump in and take part. But if you're an organisation that's really right at the basic level, or your audience is quite conservative about it, you might just experiment with doing a few little competitions for ticket giveaways on Twitter. So you really can choose the level of engagement and not feel inadequate if you're not doing something highly creative. So that brings us to the end of our first half of the session. So does anyone have any questions at this point? We are going to have questions at the end as well, but does anyone have any questions about the content delivered so far, or any examples that you've seen or you've tried that have worked for you? So as you know, you can type your questions in the Q&A box. Oh, okay, so we've got a question here from Lindsay. Hi, Lindsay. A Twitter novice, can you explain what a Twitter handle is? And you think you know what a hashtag is. By Twitter handle, I just mean your Twitter name. So for me, it's Audience Connect. So it comes up as @Audience Connect when people respond to me on Twitter. And my Twitter address is twitter.com/Audience Connect. So that's what I mean by a handle. It's basically just your name on Twitter. And a hashtag, yeah, the hashtag is a way of categorizing information on Twitter. So you can create your own hashtag as long as it's not being used by anyone else. There's no kind of restrictions around creating a hashtag. The hashtag turns it into a link. So, for example, we've created a hashtag for the Optimizer benchmarking project that we're doing. So it's #Optimizer. And so if you click on #Optimizer somewhere in a tweet, you'll see everything that's being said about Optimizer. So you can create any sort of hashtag. I did read recently that it's not a really good idea to create a hashtag for an event or for, say, a production or a season that's less than a week long. That it would be better to create a hashtag that's more generic about your organisation, just simply because there's not enough time to kind of get enough conversation going. But if you're promoting, some sort of musical that goes on for 3 weeks, you may want to create a hashtag specifically for it. So, and often hashtags are used for conferences and events, where people are leading up to it, and there's a lot of Twitter activity going on over a period of time about that event. So you can see all the conversation about that thing in one place. The other great thing about hashtags is you can see what hashtags people are using for sort of topical issues or topics related to the arts or your genre of the arts, and you can tap into them. So either by putting them at the end of your tweet, if your tweet is relevant to that conversation, or simply by, looking at what are the trending topics, what are the trending hashtags being used, and seeing if you can kind of jump into the conversation there, and it broadens your reach. Okay.
So
are there any other
questions?
questions?
Add something, Vicky?
Please.
Sorry, it's Jackie here. I just wanted to add, I meant to say actually at the beginning to welcome anybody to tweet during the session, and Vicky has told you what a hashtag is. It's hashtag
well, yes,
optimize.
probably CNZ Optimize would be for this one. CNZ Optimize, so you can hashtag that. Good
Hopefully
point,
you're
Jackie.
far too busy taking notes to be tweeting, but if you want to tweet, that would be great.
Good idea. Okay, I don't seem to see any other questions. Do you, Jackie, right now?
No, I don't.
So we can move right along, I think, and then if you suddenly got a burning question right now, you can hold it until the end. Give you plenty of time for questions at the end. Okay, so because we're talking about audience engagement on Twitter, I wanted to bring up the subject of TweetSeats. So because you're probably hearing about TweetSeats around and about. And a TweetSeat as a seat or one of a block of seats reserved in a cinema, a theatre or a sporting event for those who wish to send tweets to Twitter followers about the event while it's in progress. So basically, a lot of arts organisations are trialling this or have been trialling this over the last couple of years. So it may be that a performance is set aside for tweeters, for live tweeting, or it may be that a section of the theatre is set aside, or you may have an event that's nothing to do with people sitting in a theatre. It may be anything, an exhibition or whatever, but what you're trying to encourage is people to live tweet from the event using a hashtag and to sort of share the experience with others. And it's all about sort of encouraging that enthusiasm and peer-to-peer review. So I bring it up because there's no right or wrong answer about TweetSeats, but it is a debate that is quite controversial, as you can imagine. I'm sure some of you are sitting in your seats going, there's no way I would allow people to turn on their phones and live tweet from our event, and there's others of you who may have even been doing it already. Opera Australia here have recently done live tweeting and tried that as well, but lots of organisations are doing it. And as Liz, who's the marketing director of Opera Australia, said, it's word of mouth speeded up. Opera has short runs and normally they wait 2 days for a review, so Twitter gives them instant audience reviewers. There are those who love the idea of TweetSeats. There's a number of things that they feel are the benefits of this. The first is that it harnesses that real-time enthusiasm. So as you saw from those earlier tweets of the Sydney theatre goers, people are right in the moment and they really want to share. And as I read somewhere, we live in an age of continuous partial attention. So people, if they want to share, they want to share now. And so what it's about is harnessing people's ability and desire to share with their followers straight away while they're in the experience. Obviously, it provides peer-to-peer reviews and it helps influence and persuade new audiences. And there are those who say audiences are always distracted by one thing or another, so it may as well be tweeting. And in the right context, which is perhaps noisier and more informal, tweeting can be appropriate. So a couple of quotes. This is a great one. If I had to be distracted, I would rather it is for someone writing something witty and intelligent on Twitter than a couple making out in the row in front of me. Or even this one, I'm an all or nothing kind of gal, and if my friends can send me and everyone else instant micro reviews, then I want them now, not in half an hour. And I think that kind of younger generation really is about now, instant, not waiting till later. So the whole idea of the TweetSeats is that you're getting those influencers to sit in the seats and say great things about you right now. Those who are completely against TweetSeats say that the experience is compromised and that tweeters should control themselves until interval, and audiences should give performers undivided attention, and performers should be, that should say performers should be protected, that's a little typo there, protected from audience distractions, and that parts of the performance might be missed. So some great quotes here. No, you should be watching the performance or asleep. And this blogger said, in fact, I'm going to come right out and say that live tweeting, as opposed to foyer tweeting, is not going to help you engage more fully with the performance. And my favourite quote here, people who think tweeting during performances is a good idea have to be prepared to tell the actors that is what will be happening. I shall be hiding. And in fact, there was a little controversy with the West Yorkshire Playhouse where they were going to go ahead with TweetSeats and then they pulled back from it. Because they suddenly thought this is not a good idea. So the point about all this is that, there's a lot of debate going on. If you Google search TweetSeat debate or TweetSeats, you'll see a lot of stuff going on, a lot of conversation going on out there about whether tweeting in the seats is a good idea or not. So is it a good idea or is it bad etiquette? The point I'd like to make is that it's not black and white, it's a grey area. So this is a great quote here from the Washington Post. I think it should be encouraged at pre- and post-show talks, lectures, panels, symposia and the like, since there's often some very smart stuff to be said to a very small portion of the audience that deserves to be more widely aired. So in talking about TweetSeats, what I generally say is that it's all about relevance and respect. So your TweetSeat activity or not should be in context of organisational strategy, not just for the sake of it, not to be cool and do TweetSeats. It really has to be achieving something for you, and you need to have respect for the artists and also the existing patrons and audiences. It has to be well communicated, and you have to set it up in a way that it's relevant to the situation and the art form. So it may be that you do allow people to live tweet from a dress rehearsal, for example, or you may set aside a part of the theatre where people aren't going to be disturbed, other audience members aren't going to be disturbed. But how you actually do it is all dependent on your situation and what you're trying to achieve. So what works on Twitter for arts organisations and what doesn't? So these are the things that really work well. The first is transparency. Obviously, Twitter's all about honesty. There's no bullshit on Twitter, so it's a place to be really honest about who you are, what's happening behind the scenes. The more you are prepared to be honest, the more of a genuine following you will get and the more interest you will get. And if something kind of goes bad on Twitter, you need to face up to it and be right up there and be transparent. Being responsive, so it's not just about tweeting things out, it's about, first of all, answering any questions that come into you, so being conversational, but it's also about being alert of what is being said about you, what is being said about your art form, where people have problems and issues out there, and responding, being seen to be really responsive and on top of it. Being conversational, so it's very easy to sort of tweet out information, just push, 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 push. But where you'll be really successful is if you have a conversation. So if you're talking to people, responding, and I'll give you a couple of examples of that in a moment. And if you can have personality come through, a bit of a strong personality, be a bit playful, and potentially be intriguing, those sort of things work really well on Twitter and attract wider followings. Frequency is important with Twitter. The way it works, because it has such a short lifespan, so many tweets are coming through that if you just sort of tweet once every few days, you're only going to capture the people who happen to sort of spot you at the time. People don't often go to your feed and read everything consecutively. They're often just seeing your tweet in a feed, in a list, whatever it is, however they look at Twitter, it's often just passing through. So you're trying to capture people at the right moment. And the more frequent you can be, the better. And also, if you're in a situation where Jackie and I certainly were at the Real New Zealand Festival where we had a huge amount of information to get out there, you can't do that all the time on Facebook or you're going to drive people crazy and they're going to start dropping off. It's not appropriate on Facebook to be sending out constant information, several posts a day. But on Twitter, you can go for it. You know, you can really sort of, unless you're just sending out, batches of 20 tweets all at once, which is going to really annoy people, you can certainly be feeding a lot out there. And brand consistency is very important, obviously, as with all these digital tools. So I've got a few examples to illustrate what I'm talking about here. So this is a situation where the Royal Opera House obviously made an error. They tweeted something wrongly, and rather than, they were obviously alerted to it by this person, Mrs. BBB, and rather than run and hide from it, they removed the tweet, but they said that they had corrected the error and they weren't afraid to say so. So it's just about being human and real and honest. In terms of responsiveness, again, the Royal Opera House, this was, they were running a competition where people had to put in the hashtag, and someone entered the competition but didn't put in the hashtag, so they quickly jumped on there and said you'll need the hashtag, to tag with a hashtag to enter. And so it's about really sort of answering quickly when people have issues and noticing when they have issues. Steppenwolf Theatre, this example is really to show you how conversational they are. They're really great at this. So if you just look at the snapshot of their Twitter feed, they're not just sending things out. Most of this is either a retweet of someone else's tweet or responding to people. So in fact, most of the tweets on this page are them responding to people. So, if you're looking at your Twitter feed and it's just a whole lot of tweets with no at tags of other people's Twitter handles, then you know that you're saying too much and not conversing and listening enough. And another organisation that are really great about this, if you want to look at them and watch them, is Australian Ballet. So they've got a really strong digital focus and digital strategy. They're incredibly audience focused, and this is coming through in their Twitter feed where they're responding to people most of the time. So in fact, their tweets that are going out just about themselves are a really small percentage compared to those where they're responding to others. And just drilling down further into Australian Ballet, I really like their sense of personality. So when I talk about personality, this is it. They're a bit cheeky, they're lively, you know, they're really having fun on Twitter. And, you know, they have to be a little more serious on some of their other channels like the blog, but here they're able to have a bit of fun. I just wanted to raise this as Sydney Opera House, and they have the Festival of Dangerous Ideas, and they decided to call their Twitter feed Ideas at the House, so that actually it's about stimulating conversation. It's not just about this festival, and that means that the Twitter feed can keep going in between the festivals. It still has relevance. And here's an example of having a bit of fun. Again, Sydney Theatre Company inviting people to help them name a cocktail. It sounds really frivolous, but it's about, because it's for their bar, it's about inviting audiences to kind of have a bit of input and just to get engaged, really. And the more that audiences engage with you on Twitter, the more that their own followers are seeing them talking to you, and, you know, that's a way to really build up your following. I haven't really talked too much about how you build up your following, but first of all, when you're starting out, one of the best ways is to follow others who are sort of like-minded organisations or relevant organisations. And as you follow others, they tend to follow you back. A percentage of them will follow you back. But the other way to kind of keep building the followers, it's very incremental, is to keep talking and keep being out there. The more you talk, the more that you turn up under hashtags, the more that people are responding to you and their followers see you on their friends' feeds, the more exposure you're going to get and the more followers you're going to get. So being active on Twitter is really the only way to kind of gradually build that community. This is just an example of being a bit intriguing. West End producer, this person, nobody knows who it is. So it's quite funny to read about. It's a mysterious theatrical tweeter who has this moniker, West End producer. And there's a whole lot of talk going on around the West End about who could this be. Is it Cameron McIntosh? Who is it? So I think that's a little bit of fun, but it's an example of how being intriguing can really get things going. I've got 19,000 followers, this mysterious person. The Edge here in Auckland, Josie Campbell, who runs their social media, does a fabulous job, and she is particularly good at being frequent on Twitter. So as you can kind of see, looking down the dates on the right-hand side of her tweets, how many tweets she's sending out per day. And, you know, that's about sort of, I'll come to the idea of dashboards in a moment, but she's using a Twitter dashboard to be able to sort of quickly see when there's opportunities to respond to people, and just kind of keeping it moving all the time, just every time she has a break in her job, jumping across and doing a tweet or so. But they're really, really good at there's a lot of retweeting going on as well, so republishing others' tweets, and that's a way to kind of keep things moving too and build a sense of community. And nice Twitter background as well. It's very relevant at the moment with the film festival. And just talking about branding and consistency, beautiful use here, the Tate Galleries in the UK, beautiful use of their Twitter background. It's really stunning, and it really is right on brand for the Tate. So again, just really thinking about all those features on your Twitter feed that you can use to be more effective. Okay. Now, I found this recently and I thought it was really great. I've posted a link to it on my Twitter feed, and you can also Google search it, and it's the 9 tweet types. And she's a social media consultant, Lisa Barone, and she noticed that it wasn't the social media sites themselves that clients have a difficult time mastering. It's figuring out what to say once they get there. And that's really the thing with Twitter, is what do I say? That horrible sort of thing of you open up your Twitter feed in the morning and think, I have no idea what to say. And here she gives a heap of ideas as to what types of tweets to use. So the first is questions. So this is asking questions of your followers, showing that you value their opinion and it's engaging them, and then of course respond when they respond. So it might be a simple question about what are you doing today, what are you looking at right now, what are you working on, or it might be a more detailed question that's kind of a bit of customer survey type stuff. The information sharing is, she specifies really that it's content not created by you necessarily, but information that you think your audience can benefit from. So I'd say that's, primarily what I do on my particular Twitter feed, because I'm a consultant, is I'm sharing information. I'm a bit of a content aggregator, so I'm sharing information that I think people will find useful. And you can do that as an arts organisation as well. So you don't have to sort of think of everything yourself. You might see something that someone else has tweeted or someone else has posted somewhere on a blog, and you can share that. The problem-solving thing is great. It's about finding questions, looking at what's coming through the Twitter sphere, looking at feeds, looking at lists, etc., and finding a question that you feel confident to answer and then hopping into the conversation. And solving other people's problems, she says, is an effective way to brand yourself as an expert. And to be seen to be helpful and the type of person that people want to follow. And opinions is about sharing your opinion and giving people a bit of a unique insight into your head. You're giving people something to relate to and connect to. And how opinionated you want to be, of course, will depend on your brand and who you are and what you're trying to achieve. You want to be careful, but at the same time you want to be a bit honest and a bit out there. So that's where you're going to get most engagement on Twitter. Link promotion is about tweeting links out to your own content or promotions you're running. So you're putting stuff on your website all the time, on your blog, Facebook page, photo albums and things. So don't forget to tweet about it. Don't forget to tweet that your e-newsletter's just gone out. Most e-newsletters have a link to an online version, so you can link people straight to that and then they can sign up to your e-news. So just utilise what content you've got going on the other channels and tweet about that. Community highlighting, I thought, was an interesting one. It's about highlighting people in the community who are doing or saying great stuff. So it's about people you might want to showcase in your own community, amongst your own audience, in the sector, whatever. And it really does show you up to be very community-minded when you do that, because it's not just about tweeting about what you're doing, it's tweeting about other great things that you can see out there. And conversation, obviously. So that's an easy way to get a few tweets going on your Twitter feed, is if you watch what people are saying in the sector and just respond to 3 or 4 people. That's 4 tweets that you've sent out in an hour or whatever. And retweeting is similar. So retweeting reinforces your role as a content aggregator. People know to go to your feed because you're going to retweet them great stuff that you found. And lastly, the slice of life stuff is the what are you thinking about right now stuff, the real human stuff. You don't want to dominate your Twitter feed, especially if it's a professional feed with this particularly, but it certainly humanises things if you do a little bit of this and amongst everything else. So as you can see with these 9 tweet types, if you alternate between them, you're going to get a Twitter feed that's really interesting, really rich, varied, serving a lot of different followers. So I think this is a great one. So a couple of examples of useful content, the whole behind-the-scenes stuff. So here's the Royal Opera House advertising that they had a video about how point shoes were made, and you can see it got 13 retweets, so it was one of their kind of more successful tweets. So people always want the behind-the-scenes stuff, and also this is that slice of life stuff. Someone just saw something in a piece of art in a hotel bathroom, took a photo of it, and it's so easy to tweet things now, whether you take it through Instagram or whether you take it on your smartphone and just load it to Twitter straight away. It's so easy to take a photo and just load it straight away. And that whole kind of, hey, look what I just saw on the street thing, if it's on brand, if it's related to you, what you do and your art form, can be really, really interesting for people. And it's easy to achieve. And so just whatever tools you're using for Twitter, whether you're using a dashboard, and I'll come to that in a second, or whether you're using the main Twitter interface and you use some other free tools to track your Twitter activity, remember you're not just looking at followers, you're looking at the engagement measures. So number of mentions, number of retweets, your reach, and also your engagement scores. And basically there's a number of tools out there that you can use. The ones that I'd probably recommend, but everyone has different ones that they use. I use Sprout Social, which I'll show you a screenshot of in a moment, which is a dashboard where you can manage most of your social media activity, and it gives me these engagement and influence measures. And there's all sorts of detailed algorithms behind these engagement measures. You may use Clout or you may use Cred as tools to measure influence and these sort of scores that show how well you're doing. The key is to pick one, I think, and track it over time. So it's not about necessarily understanding all the details of why you got an engagement score of 80. It's like if I got an engagement score of 80 today and then in a month's time it's dropped down to 40, then that's a warning sign to me that I'm kind of starting to push too much stuff out and not be engaged enough. If my influence score goes down, it means that maybe I've lost a few followers that had high followings, that type of thing. So it's really just setting a benchmark and using it as an indicator over time. But so in terms of dashboards, Sprout Social, Hootsuite, and TweetReach are probably the most common. I don't use Hootsuite and TweetReach regularly myself, so I can't tell you too much about them. I really like Sprout Social. And in terms of tracking tools, TweetReach is a great free tool for seeing how far your tweet went. And Clout with a K, Cred with a K, K-R-E-D, and Twitter Counter are good analysis and tracking tools. But they're by no means all of them. If you just Google search, top 10 Twitter analytics tools, you'll find no end of blog posts that talk about really good tools, and you can go and have a trial of some of them. So I'm just going to sort of bring this to an end with talking about a few tips for managing your Twitter activity. It is really hard to keep up with Twitter when you don't have someone who is doing it full-time for you. And so that's it. And also when your head needs to be in a number of different places at one time, how do you kind of keep following Twitter feeds constantly and make sure that you're jumping in there? And it's no easy answer, I have to say, but I have a few tips. So the first thing, I've talked before about developing a social media policy. It's really important in terms of it's going to be the process by which you decide what you're going to say on Twitter, what you're trying to achieve with Twitter, along with the other channels, who's going to be the people who tweet, how far is too far with content, and how frequently are you going to be tweeting and things like that. So all that stuff gets kind of fleshed out in the process of creating your social media policy. So it's a really good thing to do. And I've also advocated setting a social media content calendar. There are numerous ways to do this. With some of the organisations I work with, it's better just to send an email back and forth and say, this week we're going to talk about this. Others have really detailed sort of spreadsheets or documents that plot ahead social media content for the next 3 months. One way or another, you want to think about, you want to get into the calendar all the key events internally and externally that might be fodder for your tweets and your posts. So that's about kind of the high-level planning. On a day-to-day basis, having a dashboard that you use is a really good idea. I'll show you a screenshot of that in a moment and tell you a bit more about that. Assigning more than one staff member to tweet can really help, and that's about really setting that up properly in your policy and everyone understanding when they're tweeting, what they can do, etc. We've heard of big events where there's a tweet roster, so that if there's things sort of happening over the weekends and things that and it's an event, perhaps a festival that's going on for a period of a few weeks, that you roster it out so that one person isn't having to tweet 24/7, for 3 weeks on end, or they're going to get pretty burnt out. But having a sort of team of tweeters really does help, as long as you communicate really well when you're tweeting and about what and who's responsible at what time. Setting up lists on Twitter is a really good thing to do. So within Twitter, you can set up public and private lists. So the public lists, you may have a list of, theatre companies in Auckland, for example, and you put all the Twitter feeds in there that you advocate as good Twitter feeds related to that subject. First of all, if you make it public, it's a great list for people to follow, so they can follow your list, and it's also an endorsement. And also switching that around, you want to be on people's lists, so you want other organisations to put you on their lists. But you can also make them private as a way of managing. So one thing that I found quite useful is if, for example, I want to keep an eye on all the key, classical music media for a client, for example, around the world, I can put them in a list. And then just when I'm looking at tweets, I can see what they're all saying in a grouping, and then I can kind of talk to them and start entering the conversation. So it's just a way of kind of controlling the number of Twitter feeds that you're watching at any time under different categories depending on what you're doing at the time, what you're focused on at the time. And sort of thinking about your hashtags in advance and then making sure they're used and publicised. If you have got a number of staff members tweeting, it's a really good idea to invest in smartphones and have them download apps, like whether it's a dashboard app or whether it's Twitter or Facebook apps, enabling them basically to tweet wherever they are in the moment and to maximise opportunities. And pre-scheduling you can do through a dashboard. It's a really great way to keep some basic Twitter activity going when you're really busy on a range of things. So, for example, if you've got a festival going on and there's a number of events happening tomorrow, and you want to make sure that you at least get the basic tweets out about when each event is and when it's starting, you can pre-schedule them to come out at different times, and then you can use your mind's a bit freed up to just focus on conversing in the moment with things that come up, and opportunities that come up during the day. So the only thing with pre-scheduling is there's nothing worse than sort of saying, hey everyone, there's a great tree planting event this morning at 9 on a Saturday morning or something. You sleep in and wake up and realise it's pouring with rain and that the event was cancelled and you'd pre-tweeted about it. So you've got to be a little bit careful about your pre-scheduling. But related to that, I find it's helpful to write tweets in batches. So if you've got, a performance coming up or an exhibition, for example, write a whole lot of tweets, sit down for a couple of hours and write a whole lot of possible tweets about that event, and just have them up your sleeve, and then you can pull them out when needed. The reason I find it helpful is that sometimes I find it hard to jump from mindset to mindset on different things, and so if you just do all your tweeting, you kind of get into the mode of writing tweets, that 140-character creative writing mode. It's quite good to do it in sort of bunches and do what you can in advance, and it just helps you later on when you're really busy. So this is just an example. This is in Sprout Social. So this is me, pretending to pre-schedule a tweet. So I can write the tweet and then I can choose the date and time, and it gives me some suggested times, or the hot times on Twitter in New Zealand, and it's in the New Zealand time zone as well. You can set your time zone. And so this is like a wider view of Sprout Social. If you look along the top, it manages everything: my messages, my feeds, the scheduler, all the reporting, things like that. So it's kind of everything in one place. So which dashboard you use will completely depend on how you like to work. And just a reminder that you should have a little account on Bitly or similar, or tinyURL, where you can shorten your URLs. You place the long web address into the box on Bitly, and then it shortens it for you. And so you end up with a little short URL and you're not using your 140 characters, but also it tracks the clicks on the link and gives you a few statistics around that, so that's really useful too. So when you're setting everything up, make sure you've got a Bitly account set up, bitly.com. And just this last little point before we finish up, don't expect Twitter to be an instant, to provide instant conversion to ticket sales. It just doesn't work that way unless, as this person says, you have a big name or a real offer that's, just so amazing that people have to grab it right there and then. Twitter is an engagement and community building tool. It is part of the fabric of everything that goes together in persuading someone to get to the point of buying a ticket or making a commitment. You can, of course, promote ticket sales and things on Twitter, but it's not generally a tool that I see that converts instantly to ticket sales, less so than Facebook, actually. So just as a recap, we talked about Twitter overall as an audience engagement tool, Twitter and your wider strategy, and those different levels of engagement on Twitter that you can pick from depending on what works for you, and then a little bit about the TweetSeats debate, ways to maximise the opportunity, and some tips for managing your Twitter activity. I've got a few resources here that are quite useful. I found these great ones and did some little bit.ly links for you just to show you how that's done. Yeah, so that's kind of it. And I just wanted to say that, you know, even the most famous people make stuff up, so don't be too worried about, you know, making a mistake sometimes. Hugh Jackman, Australian actor Hugh Jackman, tweeted having lunch on the harbour across from the Opera Centre instead of saying the Sydney Opera House, and created a furore, only because he was famous and Hugh Jackman, so probably won't happen to you. But, you know, sometimes you make a few mistakes and that's okay. So that's it, and I'm going to go down to the question box now and see if we've got any questions.
There is a question from Tanya in the chat for you.
Yes. Tanya, do you want to ask this question in person? If so, unmute yourself.
I don't have to, but no, I could. I just got rung up by somebody, you know, a few weeks back, and they said that they could track. We live in Rotorua, and they can track audience. So telling us when, say, tourists are using the word Rotorua in a tweet, and then giving us access to those audiences through that method. Have you heard of anybody doing that kind of tracking, and is it worthwhile?
That's interesting, because pretty much any of us can track, you know, through a search. We can track what people are saying about on Twitter, so I'd probably have to see a bit more about what they're suggesting and be happy for you to send it to me and I can have a look at it. Okay. It's probably just someone jumping on the bandwagon and, you know, offering a service, but anyone can, through a sort of saved search or through looking at hashtags, you can track what's being said at you on Twitter. So I'm not sure what they mean by access to them, but yeah, send me the stuff. I'll have a look at it. Actually, it'd be interesting.
Thank you. Yeah, because we're just, I mean, obviously looking at ways to try and grow our Twitter audience here, and it's fairly small at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, there's no magic bullets really with Twitter, but it would be interesting to see what they're saying to you. So do feel free to send it along to me.
Thank you.
Jackie, have you seen any other questions?
Not so far.
Oh, we've got a little comment from Felicity Connell from the Govette Brewster Art Gallery. They reached their 1,000 followers 5 minutes ago. Congratulations, Felicity. That is a really big achievement. Getting to 1,000 is pretty hard in the initial stages, so you've done really well.
And in fact, that was something that I was going to add, is that, and all of you will be aware of this, that, you know, Twitter growth happens very slowly and very organically. It's not like Facebook where you can have kind of, you know, you might be doing something and then you might get lots more people following you. So if you look at the kind of comparison between followers on Twitter and Facebook fans, often there'll be a really big difference in those numbers, and don't feel disheartened by that, because on Twitter it just takes longer to engage and to build up a really kind of connected audience. And in fact, if you look at some arts organisations, they actually have a bigger following on Twitter than they do on Facebook. So, for example, the International Film Festival has a huge following on Twitter, but you can see why that particular channel would work really well for them, and they're much less engaged on Facebook. But just not to be disheartened if if it's taking you a long time to build that up. It's just one of those things that happens over the long term.
That's a really great point. Thanks, Jackie. Sally's asked what protocols there are around retweeting, so if you want to add a comment but need to edit the original tweet. There's no particular protocol. It's very okay it's actually a really good idea to, if you retweet, just to add a little comment as to why you liked it or what you think about it. It kind of makes it a bit more personalised, but you can either just hit the retweet button, retweet it, that's fine, or you can put the RT words in it and you can sort of add a little comment. But it is seen as it's a good thing to do, I think, because it personalises and makes more relevant to your followers the retweet. It's saying to your followers, this is why I'm retweeting this for you. So, and Steve has asked about urban audiences. When I say that, the statistics and demographics that are found, and there's very few available in New Zealand actually, which is quite frustrating. So they're mostly international ones that I'm looking at, but they do suggest that most tweeters are in urban areas. So it doesn't necessarily that they're more Twitter savvy, but it's just that, I don't know, maybe they're more predisposed to Twitter. I don't know how that works. Maybe they're lonelier, stuck in their little apartments and, you know, tweeting to each other. I don't know. But in terms of rural people, yeah, well, I mean, I don't have enough demographics at my fingertips to know how many rural tweeters there are in this country. But Twitter, it really just doesn't matter where you are, really. In fact, that whole thing about networking is really interesting, that you can tap into groups all over the world of any type of interest, of any level of hierarchy or whatever you can tap into and start communicating. So, in fact, for those in rural areas or more isolated, Twitter is a fantastic tool for sort of connecting in with people of your subject matter interest. I don't know if that's quite answered that question, but hopefully a little bit. So I think we're coming up to our close time, Jackie. I just wanted to stress to everyone that I'm really happy to answer questions. Often questions are thrown at me and I can't answer them, but I'm always intrigued if I can't and I want to find the answer. So please feel free to email me afterwards any questions that pop into your mind, and also any case studies and things. That I'm always happy to feature them on my Twitter feed. So thanks for listening. And Jackie, shall I hand back to you now?
Yes, that's great. Thank you so much, Vicky. That was really enlightening, and it's always really great to just hear what the latest kind of things are happening and seeing really good examples of how people are using things well. And I just want to thank everybody who has dialed in. We really appreciate you taking time out of your very busy workloads to join us, and we really hope that you're enjoying the webinar series. And if you are around on the 29th of August, it will be really great for you to join us for the online advertising webinar. So thanks so much, everybody, and please do fill in our feedback survey if you have a moment. Thanks so much.